Do we need to start from the top again?
Yeah. All right, now we're live. Welcome to the TnT Podcast. This is Thomas Lindsey.
And Thomas Lindsey.
And we're back in person. There we go. And he came over to my side today. So we got a little bit of a short one. We're going to do three pages today. And then... yeah, we're probably going to take a nap. So yeah, let's get into it.
All right, so we left off, he was talking about BHE and how they had the talent and experience to manage huge utility projects requiring investments of $100 billion or more, and that they were ready, willing, and able to take on such opportunities. So continue on to the investments. We are now on page 10. Oh, actually, we finished page 10 as well. We read those top holdings that he has. And we read all the way through page 10. All right, so page 11.
Yep.
Forecasting interest rates has never been our game, and Charlie and I have no idea what rates will average over the next year, or 10 or 30 years. Or perhaps jaundiced view is that the pundits who opine on these subjects reveal by that very behavior far more about themselves than they reveal about the future. What we can say is that if something close to current rates should prevail over the coming decades, and if corporate tax rates also remain near the low level businesses now enjoy, it is almost certain that equities will over time perform far better than long-term fixed rate debt instruments. That rosy prediction comes with a warning. Anything can happen to stock prices tomorrow. Occasionally, there will be major drops in the market, perhaps of 50% magnitude or even greater. But the combination of the American tailwind, about which I wrote last year, and the compounding wonders described by Mr. Smith will make equities the much better long-term choice for the individual who does not use borrowed money and who can control his or her emotions. Others, beware. You have any thing to comment about that?
No.
Okay. When he says the words described by Mr. Smith, what is he referring to?
They were talking about Mr. Smith earlier.
Right, early in the letter.
Yeah.
And what did he discover?
I don't remember that part.
So Mr. Smith's theory, if I'm remembering correctly, was that bonds would perform better in deflationary times, and stocks would perform better in inflationary times.
But they figured out that wasn't true, right?
Right, and a big part of that was because the companies would reinvest their retained earnings. Remember that part?
Mm-hmm.
And because they reinvest their retained earnings, there's that element of compound interest.
Yeah.
And so that's what he's referring to when he says the compounding wonders described by Mr. Smith will make equities the much better long-term choice for the individual who does not use borrowed money and who can control his or her emotions. So what is the why does he call out those that use borrowed money here?
I'm not sure.
Well, earlier he says there might be major drops in the market.
Yeah.
Perhaps 50% or even more. And if you are buying equities with borrowed money, and the equities drop by 50% or more, the
loan can default or whatever.
Well, yeah, you might face a margin call, and then
happened to me before.
Yeah, it could be pretty devastating to. But even if you don't face the margin call, you still you borrow the money at a certain rate, and you bought an equity that then dropped it by half price. Well, you still owe the full money plus the interest that you on the money that you borrowed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even if you don't have a margin call, it's still problematic.
Yeah.
All right, continue on. All right, the road ahead. 3 decades ago, my Midwestern friend, Joe Rosenfield, then in his 80s, received an irritating letter from his local newspaper. In blunt words, the paper asked for biographical data it planned to use in Joe's obituary. Joe didn't respond. So, a month later, he got a second letter from the paper, this one labeled urgent. Charlie and I long ago entered the urgent zone. That's not exactly great news for us, but Berkshire shareholders need not worry. Your company is 100% prepared for our departure. The two of us base our optimism upon 5 factors. First, Berkshire's assets are deployed in an extraordinary variety of wholly or partly owned businesses that, averaged out, earn attractive returns on the capital they use. Second, Berkshire's positioning of its controlled businesses within a single entity endows it with some important and enduring economic advantages. Third, Berkshire's financial affairs will unfailingly be managed in a manner allowing the company to withstand external shocks of an extreme nature. Fourth, we possess skilled and devoted top managers for whom running Berkshire is far more than simply having a high-paying and/or prestigious job. Finally, Berkshire's directors, your guardians, are constantly focused on both the welfare of owners and the nurturing of a culture that is rare among giant corporations. The value of this culture is explored in Margin of Trust, a new book by Larry Cunningham and Stephanie Cuba that will be available at our annual meeting. That might be a book worth checking out because learning the culture of Berkshire Hathaway could be very valuable.
Yeah.
Charlie and I have very pragmatic reasons for wanting to assure Berkshire's prosperity in the years following our exit. The Mungers have Berkshire holdings that dwarf any of the family's other investments, and I have a full 99% of my net worth lodged in Berkshire stock. I have never sold any shares and have no plans to do so. My only disposal of Berkshire shares, aside from charitable donations and minor personal gifts, took place in 1980, when I, along with other Berkshire stockholders who elected to participate, exchanged some of our Berkshire shares for the shares of an Illinois bank that Berkshire had purchased in 1969, and that in 1980 needed to be offloaded because of changes in the bank holding company law.
What?
Just seeing if you had your eyes open or not.
I do.
Okay.
I'm reading.
Okay. Today, my will specifically directs its executors, or executors, either way, as well as the trustees who will succeed them in administering my estate after the will is closed, not to sell any Berkshire shares. My will also absolves both the executors and the trustees from liability for maintaining what obviously will be an extreme concentration of assets. The will goes on to instruct the executors, and in time the trustees, to each year convert a portion of my A shares into B shares, and then distribute the Bs to various foundations. Those foundations will be required to deploy their grants promptly. In all, I estimate that it will take 12 to 15 years for the entirety of the Berkshire shares I hold at my death to move into the market. Absent my will's directive that all my Berkshire shares should be held until their scheduled distribution dates, the safe course for both my executors and trustees would be to sell the Berkshire shares under their temporary control, and reinvest the proceeds in U.S. Treasury bonds, with maturities matching the scheduled dates for distributions. That strategy would leave the fiduciaries immune from both public criticism and the possibility of personal liability for failure to act in accord with the prudent man standard. Are you following this?
It's a little confusing, but basically what he's trying to do is when he's done retiring, he's going to get rid of all of his shares, and then basically all of his people that's on his estate or whatever will get like bonds instead.
Okay, so yeah, let me see if I can clarify it a little bit for you. Right, he's talking about his will, so this is when he's dead.
Yeah.
This will happen when he's dead.
Yeah.
And this was back in, this is the 2019 letter.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is still current. 2019 was 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
So we're talking about what he historically wrote here.
Okay.
And so he says today, whenever this was written, I could scroll ahead to look to see, but it's the 2019 letter, so it's written early in 2020. That they'll be directed to continue to hold Berkshire shares, but to convert them from A to B, and then to distribute them to various foundations.
Yeah.
He's saying if he didn't put that in there, then the more prudent financial decision would normally be to sell the shares and then put them into treasuries.
Oh, so he's not doing that.
Right, he's telling them not to do that because he wants them to stay into Berkshire shares.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so is that a little more clear?
Yeah.
Hang in there. We're doing great. I myself feel comfortable that Berkshire shares will provide a safe and rewarding investment during the disposal period. There is always a chance, unlikely but not negligible, that events will prove me wrong. I believe, however, that there is a high probability that my directive will deliver substantially greater resources to society than would result from a conventional course of action. So he's saying he believes that by them converting the A's to B's and then distributing them that way, that it'll have a higher value if he does it that way. Key to my Berkshire-only instructions is my faith in the future judgment and fidelity of Berkshire directors. They will regularly be tested by Wall Streeters bearing fees. At many companies, these super salesmen might win. I do not, however, expect that to happen at Berkshire. Boards of directors. In recent years, both the composition of corporate boards and the purpose have become hot topics. Once, debate about the responsibilities of boards was largely limited to lawyers. Institutional investors and politicians have weighed in as well. Today, institutional investors and politicians have weighed in as well. My credentials for discussing corporate governance include the fact that, over the last 62 years, I have served as a director of 21 publicly owned companies, listed below. In all but 2 of them, I have represented a substantial holding of stock. In a few cases, I have tried to implement important change. During the first 30 or so years of my services, it was rare to find a woman in the room unless she represented a family controlling the enterprise. This year, it should be noted, marks the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which guaranteed American women the right to have their voices heard in a voting booth. Their attaining similar status in a boardroom remains a work in progress. Over the years, many new rules and guidelines pertaining to board composition and duties have come into being. The bedrock challenge for directors, nevertheless, remains constant. Find and retain a talented CEO possessing integrity for sure, who will be devoted to the company for his or her business lifetime. Often that task is hard. When the directors get it right, though, they need to do little else. But when they mess it up, audit committees now work much harder than they once did and almost always view the job with appropriate seriousness. Nevertheless, these committees remain no match for managers who wish to game numbers, an offense that has been encouraged by the scourge of earnings guidance, an offense, sorry, not an offense, but an offense, I spelled the same way, that has been encouraged by the scourge of earnings guidance and the desire of CEOs to hit the number. My direct experience, limited thankfully, with CEOs who have played with the company's numbers indicates that they were more often prompted by ego than by a desire for financial gain. Compensation committees now rely much more heavily on consultants than they used to. Consequently, compensation arrangements have become more complicated. I don't know how much you're getting this, but what committee member wants to explain paying large fees year after year for a simple plan? And the reading of proxy material has become a mind-numbing experience. Hopefully reading this letter is not mind-numbing for you. One very important improvement in corporate governance has been mandated, a regularly scheduled executive session. I'm going to have you read the list of the 20-plus companies that he worked on.
Sure.
But when we get there. One very improvement in corporate governance has been mandated, a regularly scheduled executive session of directors at which the CEO is barred. Prior to that change, truly frank discussions of CEO's skills, acquisition decisions, and compensation were rare. Acquisition proposals remain a particularly vexing problem for board members. The legal orchestration for making deals has been refined and expanded, a word aptly describing attendant costs as well, but I have yet to see a CEO who craves an acquisition bring in an informed and articulate critic to argue against it. And yes, include me among the guilty. All right, now, before you read the next part, that's a bit of chunk of stuff. I'm not sure how much you caught of it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much you need to catch of it. Obviously, he was talking about women in the boardroom and the 19th Amendment. And then he was talking about, the difficulty in the challenges that directors face regarding board composition and finding and retaining the talented CEO.
Alrighty.
So anyway, what were the companies you?
Alright, Berkshire, Boost, Chip Stamps, Cap, City, ABC, Coca-Cola, Data Documents, Dempster, General Growth, Gillette, isn't that like the shavers?
Mm-hmm.
Kraft Heinz,
Maracaibo.
Oil, Moose.
Munsingware.
I've never heard of that one. What do they do? Munsingware. Omaha National Bank, Pinkerton, Portland Gas and Light, Solomon, San Bruno, Tribune Oil, U.S. Air,
Vornado.
Fernando, Washington Post, and West Coast Financial. I've heard about 70% of these, not all of them.
All right, we got 2 more pages to go. Hang in there with me, okay?
Okay.
So we can get this done, and we don't have to do a 4th
No, we don't.
video on one letter.
We don't.
All right. Overall, the deck is stacked in favor of the deal that's coveted by the CEO and his or her obliging staff. It would be an interesting exercise for a company to hire 2 expert acquisition advisors, one pro and one con, to deliver his or her views on a proposed deal to the board, with the winning advisor to receive, say, 10 times the token sum paid to the loser. Don't hold your breath awaiting this reform. The current system, whatever its shortcomings for shareholders, works magnificently for CEOs and the many advisors and other professionals who feast on deals. A venerable caution will forever be true when advice from Wall Street is contemplated. Don't ask the barber whether you need a haircut. Over the years, board independence has become a new area of emphasis. One key point relating to this topic, though, is almost invariably overlooked. Director compensation has now soared to a level that inevitably makes pay a subconscious factor affecting the behavior of many non-wealthy members. Think for a moment of the director earning $250,000 to $300,000 per year for board meetings, consuming a pleasant couple of days 6 or so times a year. Frequently, the possession of one such directorship bestows on its holder 3 to 4 times the annual median income of U.S. households. I missed much of this gravy train. As a director of Portland Gas Light in the early 1960s, I received, guess how much he received annually for his services? $100. To earn this princely sum, I commuted to Maine 4 times a year. And nowadays, a lot of them are getting paid $250,000 to $300,000 a year. And job security now, it's fabulous. Board members may get politely ignored, but they seldom get fired. Instead, generous age limits, usually 70 or higher, act as the standard method for the genteel ejection of directors. What is genteel ejection?
I don't know what that one means.
So, what would ejection be?
I don't know.
It means they get kicked out. They get ejected. It means firing them.
Yeah.
But to eject them in a genteel manner would be like, meaning it's a polite ejection. So they don't scream in their face, "You're fired, get out of here." They say, "Oh, you've reached our age limit."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reached their age limit. You're getting a little old for this.
Is it any wonder that a non-wealthy director now hopes, or even he calls those NWD, now hopes or even yearns to be asked to join a second board, thereby vaulting into the $500,000 to $600,000 class? To achieve this goal, the NWD will need help. The CEO of a company searching for board members will almost certainly check with the NWD's current CEO as to whether NWD is a good director. Good, of course, is a code word. If the NWD has seriously challenged his or her present CEO's compensation or acquisition dreams, his or her candidacy will silently die. When seeking directors, CEOs don't look for pit bulls. It's the Cocker Spaniel that gets taken home. Despite the logic of it all, the director for whom fees are important, indeed craved, is almost universally classified as independent, while many directors possessing fortunes very substantially linked to the welfare of the corporation are deemed lacking in independence. Not long ago, I looked at the proxy material of a large American company and found that 8 directors had never purchased a share of the company's stock using their own money. They, of course, had received grants of stock as a supplement to their generous cash compensation. This particular company had long been a laggard, but the directors were doing wonderfully. Paid with my own money ownership, of course, does not create wisdom or ensure business smarts. Nevertheless, I feel better when directors of our portfolio companies have had the experience of purchasing shares with their savings, rather than simply having been the recipients of grants. Hang in there with me.
Mm-hmm.
Did you follow that? Do we need to talk about that or go over that?
So basically,
if, let's say you're the CEO,
Yeah.
and you've got a director on your board,
Yeah.
and that director on your board wants to stay a director on the board, and also maybe wants to be the director on some other board
Yeah.
for another company. Well, if that director never challenges the CEO as far as compensation or as far as any kind of deals he wants to get done,
Yeah.
then that CEO is more likely to be favorable to keeping that director on, and also recommending that director to another company.
Yeah.
So in that situation, you get a director or more than one director that doesn't challenge the CEO.
Yeah.
It might just be a yes man or woman, a yes woman, and they just go along with whatever the CEO wants.
Yeah.
And Warren's doesn't say it necessarily directly, but that's not necessarily what you want in a company, in its board of directors. You don't want somebody who's just going to go along with the CEO for whatever he or she wants done, as far as what he gets paid or the deals he wants to do.
Yeah.
We're almost done, dude. Okay. All right. Here, a pause is due. I'd like you to know that almost all the directors I've met over the years have been decent, likable, and intelligent. They dressed well, made good neighbors, and were fine citizens. I've enjoyed their company. Among the group are some men and women that I would not have met except for our mutual board service, and who have become close friends. Nevertheless, many of these good souls are people whom I would never have chosen to handle money or business matters. It simply was not their game. They, in turn, would never have asked me for help in removing a tooth, decorating their home, or improving their golf swing. Moreover, if I were ever scheduled to appear on Dancing with the Stars, can you imagine Warren Buffett on Dancing with the Stars? I would immediately seek refuge in the witness protection program. We are all duds at one thing or another. For most of us, the list is long. The important part is to recognize that if you are Bobby Fischer, you must play only chess for money. At Berkshire, we will continue to look for business-savvy directors who are owner-oriented and arrive with a strong specific interest in our company. Oh, well, maybe they can look for you and me. We're going to have two Thomas Lindseys as directors for Berkshire Hathaway.
That would be great. I would love that.
Yeah. Thought and principles, not robot-like process, will guide their actions. In representing your interests, they will, of course, seek managers whose goals include delighting their customers, cherishing their associates, and acting as good as citizens of both their communities and our country. Those objectives are not new. They were the goals of able CEOs 60 years ago and remain so. Who would have it otherwise? Short subjects. In past reports, we've discussed both the sense and nonsense of stock repurchases. Our thinking boiled down. Berkshire will buy back its stock only if A, Charlie and I believe that it is selling for less than it was worth, and B, the company, upon completing the repurchase, is left with ample cash. Calculations of intrinsic value are far from precise. Consequently, neither of us feels any urgency to buy an estimated dollar value for a very real 95 cents. In 2019, the Berkshire price to value equation was modestly favorable at times, and we spent $5 billion on repurchasing about 1% of the company. Over time, we want Berkshire share count to go down. If the price to value discount, as we estimate it, widens, we will likely become more aggressive in purchasing shares. We will not, however, prop the stock at any level. Shareholders having at least $20 million in value of A or B shares and an inclination to sell shares to Berkshire may wish to have their broker contact Berkshire's Mark Millard at that phone number. We request that you phone Mark between those times, calling only if you're ready to sell. You want to discuss that at all?
No, I don't think we need to.
All right. In 2019, Berkshire sent $3.6 billion to the U.S. Treasury to pay its current income tax. The U.S. government collected $243 billion from corporate income tax payments during the same period. From these statistics, you can take pride that your company delivered 1.5% of the federal income taxes paid by all of corporate America. 55 years ago, when Berkshire entered its current incarnation, the company paid nothing in federal income tax, for good reason, too. Over the previous decade, the struggling business had recorded a net loss. Since then, as Berkshire retained nearly all of its earnings, the beneficiaries of that policy became not only the company's shareholders, but also the federal government. In most future years, we both hope and expect to send far larger sums to the Treasury. So this is very similar to what he's written in past years about this subject.
He always talks about how he likes to pay all these taxes.
And then he talks about what will happen for the annual meeting. I'm just going to skip that because that's pretty much always the same.
Yeah.
And he ends it with inviting people to the annual meeting.
Yeah.
And then he signs it off.
Right.
Warren E. Buffett, chairman of the board.
Alrighty, guys, check out the Moo link, the TnT Podcast. It's in the description. Also, thank you guys for listening and watching. And yeah, this is Thomas Lindsey. I'm out.
And Thomas Lindsey. I'm out.